Video, I'm going to review the recent failure of offshore wind projects off the coast of New Jersey. After a quick history, I'm going to touch on what went wrong, why it's a problem that's common to low greenhouse gas power projects, why it's also an example for better project management at the national level, and a few thoughts on what to do going forward. First, a little history. New Jersey is an example of how hard the road to lower carbon intensity is, and why even a relatively well off, financially speaking, location can run up against the bane of greenhouse gas financing. As of today, New Jersey does better than most states in terms of carbon intensity. They are primarily nuclear and natural gas with a little bit of solar. There are no significant coal use, high nuclear power, industry that's not too greenhouse intensive. To do even better, the state undertook these two projects to install 2.2 gigawatts of offshore wind power. They used the Danish company oerstad. It initially sounded like a good plan. However, jump quickly to the end, the company ran into difficulties with supply chains and, most importantly, rising interest rates caused their costs to go up. They decided, the company, to pull out of the project in November 2023, and it resulted in a $4 billion write-down. In other words, the company wrote off its books, accepted as a loss, $4 billion. Companies don't do that unless they really have no other choices. I want to say up front that when I took a look at this, I didn't really come across any obvious bad guys. The state made a solid effort to make it work, and the company clearly did not decide to pull out of this project lightly. Oersted is actually a global leader in offshore wind, with operations in Europe, North America, and Asia. Oersted also faced some challenges in the current market that solar companies, all greenhouse gas projects tend to face. And that is, they are a lot of money upfront. The company has recently announced they're making changes such as pausing their dividend. When a company pauses its dividend, that's not a good sign. The offshore project did have supporters and opponents in New Jersey, but at its core, it came down to financing because of all that upfront money that was needed. From my experience, and I'm going to say this right up front for New Jersey, when a defense contractor pulls out, they're telling you something about the project. If the world leader in offshore wind pulls out of the project, any future low-cost bids you should treat with great caution. My recommendation is New Jersey should look at other options. More on that in a bit. The cancellation of the New Jersey wind project is a setback for the U.S. administration's plan for offshore wind. The target was to achieve 30 gigawatts of power by 2030, and this was 20% of that target. Given the lead times involved, I think you can safely say that 2030 goal is not going to be met. For context, electricity rates are more expensive in New Jersey than at least 60% of the country. So if an offshore wind farm is going to result in higher rates because you've got to get financing, think of your home mortgage, and it's going to be more because your interest rates went up, that's not going to be an easy sell. Offshore wind is inherently more expensive than onshore wind. It brings additional risks as well. There are many states in the U.S. that have strong renewable options because of their location, wind patterns, etc. But New Jersey is not one of them. Nukes, wind, solar all have these higher upfront costs than, say, a natural gas plant. 2 to 5 times as high. Now, they make it back in the long run. Our operating costs are a lot lower for the obvious reason of they're not having to pay constantly for natural gas. And of course, they're not emitting greenhouse gases. But a state or a county can only finance so many projects before the well runs dry. If you can afford one house, that doesn't mean you can afford and get a mortgage for a second. And that's not even touching the grid considerations, which are significant when you're talking wind and solar, but not nuclear. For a state like New Jersey, my personal take would be look at expanding nukes or consider importing green energy from somewhere else. New Jersey has not built a nuclear or any plant, be it gas, wind, in 20 years. Electricity consumption is only going to go up. So continuing to stand still is also not the answer. I'll dive even deeper into this in a future video. Companies exist to make money. You don't need a Global Hawk project manager to know that inflation drove up prices and loans are more expensive. If a company cannot increase its price, it gets out. That demonstrates why today, unlike in the year 2000, the challenge for a lot of greenhouse gas projects is not technology, but rather implementation. It's also why I don't talk too much about net zero. There's a long list of actions to take before that gets into the discussion. So I do try to not bring up problems without throwing out a thought on how to resolve them. In the area of finance and government, it's about bonds. So how about allowing states to issue low-cost greenhouse gas bonds? Fed Reserve will buy and hold. This is a lot more targeted than the current approach of using tax credits. It also allows the projects to be prioritized at a national level. Replacing coal plants where solar is a sound choice is a big bang for the buck situation. So that sounds really easy. Yeah, well, maybe not so much. So part of why I suggest something like this is the deregulated nature of power in the United States. Yes, Gen X, not one of the boomers' better choices back in the 1980s. Something that was a mistake but would be too difficult to undo. How we can attack national emissions needs a national strategy that is lacking. If I were a project manager for a day on all US projects, I have to tell you New Jersey would not be my focus area. There are other locations offering a better return for investment. My next video will offer an example of how the military prioritizes its very large budget and how that approach might be used to mitigating and managing greenhouse gas reduction efforts. Stay tuned, comment, and subscribe. And my therapy dog here, Roosevelt, and I are available for climate therapy at the next COP conference if needed. He's certified and ready to go. My last request and thought to everyone is I'm going to go back and remake some of my earlier videos. The content is still good, but I've learned a lot. And so if you took a minute and viewed them, not only would it help the YouTube algorithms, but if you comment and give me feedback, I promise you I'm going to take that in. And when I go and remake them in a few weeks here, see if I can come up with a better product for everyone. Take care. I appreciate all the support I've been getting.